Okay, so our group is doing female coerced monogamy and burying beetles. And so the hypothesis that the researchers put forward is that the more females try to interfere with the males' pheromone emissions, the less pheromone emissions that the males will do. So the reason why this is like an issue is that in burying beetles, they're like one of the few insects that participate in biparental care, which means that they both help out in the offspring raising process and caretaking. So, for example, they both look for small vertebrate carcasses that they will then have their offspring in, and they can also be good parents to the offspring, so either the dad can take care of them effectively on his own or the mom. And here's a diagram of that. So they are together, they find a carcass, and they have their little offspring on there. So this causes sexual conflict because for the males, it's better for them to have lots of females, and it's better for the females in the relationship to only have the one male. So the male will seek out a polygynous relationship if they find a large enough carcass that can support more than one female and their offspring. However, that's a little tricky because the females, it has been shown that the more females on a carcass, the smaller the mean is for the total offspring from each female. But overall, since there's more females, there's typically more offspring total. But the individual female's fitness is lowered because they produce less offspring. But the male's fitness is increased because they produce more offspring. So this kind of has lots of conflict, and it also shows that it's like for the males, it's like direct conflict with each other. So for the males, it's better to have more females, and for the females, it's better to have no more females than just them. And then right here, there's a lovely, really high quality photo of some beetles, and this male has attracted another female, which is really promiscuous. And so this experiment was set up to see how effective the females are at stopping male pheromone production through different tactics. And I'll pass it on to Sharon now to talk about the methods.
Okay, what they specifically set up was to actually capture the beetles. They actually had two baits. They used pig's lungs, or actually a male who was emitting pheromones. They maintained this whole experiment in ambient photo period temperature and conditions. And the duration was about 2 months, June 5th to July 7th. What they try to compare was one treatment group with females who were tethered, so they were unable to interfere with males who were emitting pheromones, and the other treatment group was females that were untethered, so they were able to move around and actually interfere with males. There was also a control group that they were trying to eliminate factors of, and this was using small lab mouse carcasses to compensate for tethered females, because they wanted to see if tethered females would be at a disadvantage if they were tethered. What they were measuring was the mating frequency, the total amount of time each male spent emitting pheromones, and the number and kind of females' interference behaviors during the 30-minute observation period. What they did to actually measure if males were actually emitting pheromones was when they were in a headstand position, so their heads were down and their abdomens were up, which made them realize that that's when they were actually emitting pheromones in that 30-minute observation period. Okay, all statistical analysis were carried out using non-parametric test procedures, which we're all gonna talk about. So, yeah. Okay.
Back to me. So, one of the things that they were making sure that they included in the results was females and if they were tethered or not, and how that impacted interference. So overall, tethered females interfered less than untethered females, and untethered females interfered 1 to 12 times on average, and tethered beetles only interfered 0 to 6 times on average. So when females are tethered, they interfere less on average. Oh, and I'm passing it on to Sierra.
Continuing the results. So what they also measured in this was male pheromone emission. And so what they found out that when the females were tethered down, males emitted their pheromones for longer amounts of time. This may be because due to the females not being able to move and not being able to stop them from emitting pheromones. That means that they can emit those pheromones and increase their probability of attracting another female. Now I'm going to pass it on for our final part of the results.
The last graph was showing the relationship between the duration of the pheromones emitted by males and also the frequency of females' interference, and they saw a positive correlation to untethered females with the interruption of the duration of the male's pheromones, but they didn't see any positive correlation or any correlation between the females that were tethered, since they weren't able to interfere physically with the males. Okay, now I will pass the final part to Sierra.
Hello, it's discussion time. So what they found out that even with female interference, they kind of concluded that there wasn't any direct evidence that the number of females detecting the carcass decreased, but they can assume based on logic and stuff that with the males spending more time signaling, this in the wild, it would increase the amount of females that would come. And there would also, and they also concluded, based on logic as well, that with the female interference, there would be a decrease in numbers of beetles that were attracted. Now, with these kinds of beetles, the males actually only release these pheromones on large carcasses because there is enough territory and enough resources for them to be able to mate with multiple females. And this is interesting because with the R and K factors, with a smaller amount of resources, such as a smaller carcass, the males are more monogamous and sexual signaling does not occur, and both pairs are able to dedicate more time to their young. Yet with a larger carcass and increasing the amount of females laying eggs on that carcass, the amount of attention to those youngs is more dedicated to the females paying attention to the young, instead of, because the male's time is kind of split between all the other females and stuff. One unexplored factor that they did include in our discussion that they didn't really measure was male competition, because when the males signal and release this pheromone, it attracts both females and males. So it's kind of like the male sending out a beacon, and all the rival males in the area know, like, oh, there's a nice big carcass over there. Maybe I'll go check it out. And competitive males will fight for the carcass. The victor of that will sit on top of the carcass and, frolic and mate with all the females. But the loser of that battle will actually hang out near the carcass, and when females are coming and going, it will attempt to mate with them. And this male competition also occurs through multiple species. So not only this species of rival males is attracted to this, out in the wild there are multiple species that recognize these pheromones and recognize that there is a pretty good carcass out there that they're able to use. And with that, that concludes our little video. Yeah, bye. Thanks.